Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you the top 10 best DLC Ark Tames. But just before we get into it, make sure to hit that like button and the subscribe, as it really does help me out. In at number 10 is the Bulldog. Now this thing came out when Operation released all the way back in 2017, and it is especially well known for its cuteness. But what actually makes this thing an extremely useful tame, as on the surface, this just looks like a basic shoulder pet that has little use. But this thing is probably one of the most useful creatures on Operation, due to that light on top of its head. And this is an ability it shares with the Featherlight and the Shinehorn, two creatures which you could put in the exact same spot as the Bulldog. It's just the Bulldog is the most famous for it. In terms of its use, essentially what this does is debuffs all of the harsh creatures on Operation, such as Reapers and the Nameless. In at number 9 is the Gasbags. Now this creature arrived to the Ark scene in 2018, and to people that haven't used it, this may seem like a pretty useless tame overall. It is just a fat thing. It doesn't seem like it's going to deal immense damage. Obviously it doesn't, but its main use is it is such a good travel mount, and it is actually a really great metal harvester as well. Not because it can harvest metal, it's just good at transporting you from A to B, and it has the weight to carry all of that metal along with you. And it doesn't even need a saddle for you to ride it. The saddle is only there for extra armor, obviously, and if you want a second friend to tag along with you on your ride. Also, in terms of flying over longer distances, you'll need to level up your oxygen. Yes, this is pretty much the only flyer where you will want an oxygen mutation, as that will mean that this thing can fly over longer distances. And yes, a normal oxygen mutation on a flyer is some of the worst things you can get, because flyers can't go in water. But oxygen for the Gasbags is far more useful than stamina even is. So you don't even need to level up stamina on this creature, you'll just need to hit all of that oxygen. And also the Gasbags is an extremely cute creature as well, but definitely one that is very difficult to control, and it is evident from this B-roll that I am no Gasbag master. I am absolutely terrible at controlling this thing, and it will definitely take a lot of time and a lot of skill to control this thing properly. And actually, over the course of this B-roll, I ended up dying a significant amount of times. But if you always want to have a little top tip for the Gasbags, you can always dismount just before you hit the ground if you have run out of that oxygen, and then your Gasbags will take no fall damage. Yes, after all of that you could tame another one, but these things are somewhat of a pain to tame, and you wouldn't want to lose a Gasbags anyway. They are just such valuable creatures. In at number 8 is the Snowowl, and yet again another creature that hit the Ark scene in 2018, and in my opinion this is just slightly better than the Gasbags, as it has a lot more uses for PvP and for PvE as well. The Gasbags is just such a diverse creature. In terms of its main ability, which people will see and use the most, it shares the glide ability, which it shares with the Griffin, and this ability is extremely useful for zipping across the map with insane speeds. And in the case of the Griffin, it will deal damage. Sadly for the Snowowl that isn't the case, but you're still going to get all of that speed. And also it is incredibly fun to do all of this as well, which is extremely useful for a creature to be fun as well. Also, it does have this kind of heat-seeking ability, which is really good for you PvP players out there, as it means if someone is trying to raid your base, you can simply track them down with this ability. Or if you've lost a creature that you're trying to tame in a PvE or PvP scenario, you can easily track it down if it is hidden somewhere. Obviously, you could use the tame tracker now, but for the tame tracker, this was an extremely useful ability for that use case. Also, you're going to want to be leveling that stamina up on this thing too, as when it heals creatures, it will use up all of its stamina, and the more stamina it has, the longer it can heal. But just do take into mind that this thing will heal everything in its radius, not just your tamed creatures, and you may want that in the case of if you're healing a creature that you're trying to tame, but you may not want that in the case if you're fighting a boss or enemy creatures. Also, they are insanely useful for farming with gachas, as their owl pellets are some of the ways that you can get absolutely insane loot out of gachas. If you haven't tried that already, definitely try it at some point. Get yourself a Snowowl, they're pretty easy to tame, just a basic trap and some tranks. get a Snowowl as soon as possible. They are on pre-order, so you do not need to get Extinction to find one of these things. In at number 7 is the Deinonychus. Now this is a creature which can be found on maps like Valguero and Fjorda, and is actually a pretty easy tame, and is definitely well renowned for its insane skills and abilities. Especially the fact that its bleed ability works in boss scenarios, and the fact that it can latch onto large creatures and deal that bleed ability is absolutely insane, as you don't need to worry about that creature pushing you away. You are simply just gripped onto it, and when you add pack buffs and all of that on top of it, the Deinonychus is one of the most powerful creatures in Ark, along with a creature like the Shadowmane. Except compared to the Shadowmane, this is significantly easier to tame, and you can definitely tame it at a much earlier stage, but it may take a little bit more time. Possibly using the tech suit on Genesis Part 2 can definitely be very OP, but I would say you'd probably get the Deinonychus easily before the Shadowmane. In terms of its other uses as well though, this creature is extremely mobile and is great for traversing across the map. Also, it takes no full damage as well, which is extremely useful for a creature. Obviously, you can always use the little hack when you jump off just before it hits the ground, and then the creature will take no full damage and you will take no full damage as well, but it is nice that you do not have to do that every time you do a high jump with this creature, which actually could be a significant amount considering how much parkour this does. It is just an absolutely insane creature, similar to the Rock Drake in the amount of parkour that this creature can actually do. Definitely one that you should tame at some point, and really not a difficult one, just requiring you to steal its egg from a nest and then just using torches to incubate it. In at number 6 is the Reaper. Now yet again, another creature from Arboration is on the list, and even the next creature on the list is from Arboration 2, meaning that Arboration is definitely a great DLC map, and it definitely checks out, as many Ark players say Arboration is their favourite Ark map, along with maps like Fjorda and Ragnarok, all being high tier ones for the list. And actually, thanks to Genesis Part 2, if you do have access to Genesis Part 2, the Reaper can be your first tame on that map. Obviously, on Gen 2 you have the tech suit, which makes it significantly easier, but there is also many spots near where the Reaper spawn where it will deal the damage for you. And yes, the damage is required to get the Reaper Queen to a low enough health so that it will actually impregnate you. But now, instead of you having to deal that damage, there are spots on Gen 2 where a kind of misty fog will do all of the damage for you, which means this thing can be an insanely easy and quick tame on Gen 2. If you want to check that out, just go and check out Raasclark's channel on YouTube, and he has a great tutorial. Just probably search for Raasclark Reaper Easy Tame, or Reaper Easiest Tame Raasclark, something along those lines. And when you tame one of these things, you really won't regret it, as this is by far one of Ark's best tames in dealing damage and just in general use. It is one of the best combat creatures in the game, and it is just so powerful and so cool to ride. In at number 5 is the Rock Drake. Now this sadly is the last Arboration creature on this list. I know now there are 3 on the list, and yes, it is probably the most density of creatures from one map on this list. Arboration is definitely a really great map, and one you should check out if you have the time or the actual money to buy that DLC. Now, why would I put the Rock Drake above the Reaper in this list? Well, namely, it is just because the Rock Drake is significantly better at travelling around the Arboration map, and it will just be a much more useful creature on Arboration and other maps as well, where there are some heights where the Rock Drake has a lot of things to grab onto. And it actually is pretty great on Gen 2 as well, with the likes of the Mwing being another great glider as well. Except the Rock Drake, unlike the Mwing, can scale walls and vertical surfaces, which sadly the Mwing lacks, like I've said, which actually makes the Rock Drake somewhat of a better travel mount. But not when it comes into speed, but the Rock Drake is still an incredibly fast creature, and it can even dash onto walls as well if you're close enough. In terms of its damage as well, it does a really nice, healthy amount of damage, which is extremely useful when you're traveling, and if you run into any kind of threat, you can just quickly get rid of it. You can easily kill Gicus with something like a Rock Drake. They have so much power, and a very decent health stat on top of that as well. Their weight is pretty reasonable, although you're probably not going to be transporting loads of metal with these things, but I don't know. On Arboration, I've done that a few times, and other people definitely have. But its main thing is also that its stamina drain is so little, which is so good for a flyer, and so opposite to what the Pteranodon is going to deliver you. In at number 4 is the Astrod Delus. Now, earlier on the list, we always had the Arboration creatures, but now you're going to run into a lot of Gen 2 creatures, as they are absolutely insane DLC creatures, as Gen 2 is really a map of just giving OP creatures and OP things, and the Astrod Delus is no exception at all. This thing is an absolutely insane creature with also insane requirements as well, with its saddle being locked in the 120s or 110s, which is higher than the standard survivor level, so you'll need to do transfers to actually get to that level. Or you may be able to get to that on Gen 2, but I'm not quite sure. There may be something that you can do if you defeat the bosses and then you level up from there, but I'm not quite sure on that. There'll probably be something like that. I know on the island, if you do the Overseer, you can get up to level 115, and I think the saddle is about that level, so you might be able to do some of the bosses on Gen 2 and get it to that, but the saddle is definitely a hard thing to get. But once tamed, you do have yourself an absolutely insane creature capable of pretty much defeating anyone in a PvP scenario, due to its ultimate speed, acrobatics, agility, and also insane damage as well, as this thing can shoot lasers and it runs on element, which may be expensive, but Gen 2 has an abundance of elements, so it really won't be a problem. In at number 3 is the Blood Stalker. Now, keeping with the Genesis theme, albeit not Gen 2 theme, even though this does spawn on Gen 2, it still came out on Gen 1, we have the Blood Stalker, obviously coming out in Gen 1 in the Bog biome. And what a biome that is, full of great tames but also a lot of annoyances. The Bog biome is one of Ark's most hostile and just most infuriating biomes, as pretty much everything from the insect swarms to the capros to the sarcos to the spinos just wants you dead and will always ruin your day. I would definitely recommend going to the ocean biome if you're starting on Gen 1 and building your base on some of those land island things, as you will have a significantly better time. Except resources may be a little tight for you, but it shouldn't be too bad, and then you can go to the Bog biome, tame yourself a Bloodstalker, and then you have really great travel. As on Gen 1, this is pretty much your only shout for travel. It is an absolutely insane travel mount, and it is actually really cool to ride this thing as well, as you kind of feel a bit like Spider-Man. Yes, the Bloodstalker is a very difficult tame to actually learn efficiently, and I am not the best out there at flying this thing. I'm not really that great, but I have done the Bog mission on Alpha, so at least I do have credit for that. And that is something that you'll probably want to do on Genesis Part 1, as you do need to do missions to actually defeat the final boss on the map, and missions are going to get you hexagons, and hexagons are very valuable on Gen 1, and are basically essential to completing Gen 1, and will really help you along the way. So at some point, learn to use the Bloodstalker, and even not on Gen 1, it is really useful. In at number 2 is the Mwing, yet again with another Gen 2 creature, meaning the creature in number 1 is also a Gen 2 tame as well, but you'll have to wait to see what that is. In terms of the Mwing's skills and abilities, this is by far the best travel mount in Ark in terms of speed. This thing just goes so fast and so rapid. This thing is like absolutely insane for traveling across the map. It is so cool how fast the thing can traverse across the map. And when I first saw it, I didn't even really know what to think. And it is great on the water too, as it can skim along the water like the Bloodstalker can hover over the surface of water. Except sadly this thing isn't really that great under the water, but it isn't going to be too bad. But the Mwing does have a wealth of other uses as well, apart from its insane travelling skills. Namely, this thing is great for raising creatures, as it is essentially a portable feeding trough with all that milk coming out of it. It can also, with its saddle, steal enemy creatures and also carry your own baby creatures. Also, it can only steal enemy baby creatures. If it could steal all enemy creatures, that would be a little too OP. And if you're tight on berries, this thing can gather berries too. And finally, in at number 1 is the Shadowmane. Yes, another Gen 2 creature, like I said, like you all suspected from back further in the list. And in my opinion, the Shadowmane is Ark's best DLC creature. It is packed with so many features, like being able to jump incredible heights and over really long distances. Also, over time, it can charge up its damage as well, dealing an insane amount of damage all in one strike. And on top of that, it has the hydration buff, which it shares with the Spino, and it also has pack and alpha buffs on top of that. The Shadowmane is just such an OP creature, and it can even turn invisible as well, like what the Rock Drake can do, which can be very useful in a PvP scenario if it weren't for the footprints it leaves behind. Also, the Shadowmane is great in the water too, and there's pretty much no environment the Shadowmane can't traverse and really get through quickly and efficiently. Its only real downside obviously is its absolutely annoying taming method, requiring you to feed the Shadowmane live fish without waking its sleep. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I hope you enjoyed. Also, comment down below your top 10 favourite Ark DLC creatures, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.